Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with Todd Banhazl, John Matysiak, Ricardo Diaz, the cinematographers for Season 2 of Winning Time on HBO Max. And I am so excited to have these guys on. I am a huge fan of Season 1 and Season 2. It's just a fantastic show, mixing formats and 16mm, 8mm video cameras, film. It's all over the place. And if you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend you do, because it is just a feast for the eyes. And of course, the acting and storytelling is just perfect. It is truly one of my absolute favorite shows, and I cannot wait to talk to these guys about it. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. YouTube is a great way to not only hear the show, but see the show. So you can see all of our guests and myself talking amongst each other. It's a really great way to experience Go Creative Show, and we hope you do if you aren't already doing so. Sharing is caring, so please let people know, your filmmaking friends, about Go Creative Show. And with that, I think we should jump right in, because we've got a lot to talk about and a lot of people to talk with. So let's dive right in with Todd, John, and Ricardo from Winning Time. So I'm here with Todd Banhazl, Ricardo Diaz, and John Matysiak, the cinematographers of Winning Time Season 2, which has really become, Season 1 was my favorite show at the time, and now Season 2, it's just even better. I really think you guys just nailed it this season, and I want there to be like 15 episodes. I'm kind of bummed that there's not going to be that many, but I love the show, and I just want to welcome you to Go Creative Show. So welcome. Thank you guys for coming on.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's because I'm on a delay or everyone's like, who's talking first?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think I just honored to be here with my friends, Rick and John. So this is fun. It was really cool.
Let's talk about kind of the way that you all collaborate on the show, because sometimes there are shows and cinematographers come on and they shoot every single episode and there's no breaks. Sometimes shows will do it in blocks where one cinematographer will be paired with a director, do maybe 2 or 3 or 4. How does it work on Winning Time Season 2 between the three of you? Todd, fill us in on this process.
I feel like the collaboration was all of us singing and laughing and texting and just propagating joy across the different sets and preps and office rooms for a couple months. I don't know. It was all, how do you guys think it worked? I feel like for me, it was just a constant process of sharing what we were excited about, and like a completely open platform, sharing what was going on between episodes. And, Rick, you shot my episode. So while I was shooting, we were prepping, and John, you were prepping for months while we were, it's just this, everyone was kind of mind melding. I don't know.
Well, let's go around the room. Who shot what? John, which episodes did you shoot?
I've got, I guess, what ended up being episodes 4 and 5.
Yes.
Working with Tanya Hamilton. Those were my episodes.
And Ricardo, which episodes did you shoot?
I did episode 3. It was 4 at the time, but now episode 3 that Todd directed.
Yeah,
that's right. And I'd love to get into that, because that leap from cinematographer to director is certainly interesting to me and our audience for sure. And Todd, I'm assuming you shot the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I shot the first 2, then I directed 1 with Rick, and then I shot the last 2, I think is how it broke down. So because of that, we were all always, someone was prepping while someone was shooting, and someone was testing some weird format that they were going to use for their episode, and then we were all looking at the tests. It was like a constant, yeah. From the beginning, I feel like we were all kind of mind melding. But that's what this show always does.
It also really,
yeah.
It really helps that all of us kind of know each other by some way. Todd and I have known each other for a very long time. And oddly enough, John and I have known each other for a really long time by complete coincidence. And so when it happened that all of us were on it, it was so easy and so natural to just be sharing immediately. And it was just thanks to our friendship, that was already built in. like that, like Todd said, that free flow of information. There was no ego. There was no any of that. And I think that really helped and we all helped each other. John was part of my 16 millimeter anamorphic tests. He stood there, and was my model. We were all just helping each other out any way we could.
Now, the show has a very unique look. I mean, it's basically as mixed format as you can be. You have so many different types of cameras on the show, and it's pretty intense. Like, as you watch it, it's like you have to go with it, or you may not like it. Like, it's an aggressive approach, and I think I mean, for me, it works, and I just love the feel of it. I love the nostalgia of it. I love the mixed formats. But for people that aren't familiar with the show, how do you even describe this look? Todd, what do you think?
I would describe it as a collage, like a maximalist collage of American cultural memory. And by that, I mean, like, we're kind of constantly being confronted with like different ways of seeing this time period, whether it feels like it's archival documentary footage, or it feels like it's like really cinematic, classic bravado, or it feels like super stripped down, vulnerable, fragmented piece of old memory. I don't know. It's a collage of a lot of different ideas, but it's like a loud maximalist approach.
Yeah, in this season, John, tell me about how you kind of taken the look of season 1, but brought it, up a notch for season 2.
Well, I mean, I was such a fan of what Todd did in the first season. Like, I was immediately just drawn to it, and so I think for me, it was like stepping into big shoes of like, I love what you've created, and it's like, how do we just kind of keep pushing it? And I think that's kind of echoed already, is that like we kind of just the sharing of references and even dailies, and just kind of pushing each other and be like, oh, what did you do? Like, okay, let's even go further. And so I felt like it was just constant, like, how can we push it more? How can winning time be more winning time? Like, how can it be more into itself? Which, it's funny when you do that, because of all the mixed formats and I say it's so aggressive. Like, I love this idea of like these formats beat you into submission. So if you don't like it, you're really not going to like it. But if it can beat you, it just forces you to go with it, And so that's such an interesting, mix of textures that it allows for it to go somewhere kind of organically with the story, with the characters. Because I feel like that is such like the brashness of the time period too. And so this idea of like a memory, or what we think now of a memory of what this stuff was,
it's an interesting thought about the memory. And I remember, Todd, you and I speaking about this on the last time we spoke about season 1. We had Mahi Malimar Jr. on there too. We were discussing the idea of creating memories in cinematography. And I loved it because it was like, your memories are frantic. Like, your memories are crazy. They're not necessarily linear. Things are all over the place. You're seeing things from different perspectives and different angles. And where this show is kind of all about nostalgia for that time period, I think the idea of creating memories through the cinematography is really unique. And I just don't know of any other show that does that. And I'd love to know from really all three of you where your inspiration came from for this new season. Did you have any references that you were calling on? Or were you just simply referencing season 1? Todd, we'll start with you, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I feel like it's episode dependent. I feel like part of the DNA of Winning Time was that it was designed, the visual style was designed to take each episode and let that episode sort of like be what it wants to be, like its own little movie. And that's why like certain episodes from season 1 have looks that never come back. It was meant for one character's flashback or one character's story or that one moment. And so when I was trying to find other DPs to come in, that was the thing I was looking for, is I wanted like brilliant artists that I loved their work and respected them as human beings so that they could make the thing their own. It's not like a plug and play. You're not looking for people to just like do the style. You're looking for people to come and like make it their own, which is why like the best decision I made on season 2 period is hiring these two guys, is finding these two guys for sure. And I mean that, like, because you need people, and it was with Mihai last year. It's like, you need people who are truly filmmakers and are not looking to just be like, okay, cool, tell me what to do. It's like they read the script and they know the characters in the story. And then from there, they start using the paintbrushes that we've created to go do new things. I mean, I know like Rick, you created, there's a look in our episode that doesn't exist anywhere else in the show, you know?
Well, let's talk about that, because episode 3, Todd, this was your opportunity to direct an episode. Did you direct an episode of season 1 or no?
Nope.
No. So, and was this a directorial debut for you?
Yeah, of something this size for sure. Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. All right. So there you go. Exactly. Round of applause. So episode 3 of season 2 of Winning Time, Todd, your directorial debut. You choose Ricardo to shoot this episode for you. Tell me about that collaboration, because, you're in some ways relinquishing some control over the cinematography. You now have to think from a different perspective. There must have been some growing pains going from cinematographer to director. Tell us about that experience.
I actually feel like I felt no growing pains relinquishing the cinematographer role. I'd be curious what you experienced, Rick.
I was going to say the same thing. And I've always said that because, I've always felt that Todd's just was kind of meant to be a director who really loved cinematography and the heroes and the figures that are in that world. But I always kind of told Todd and others, I think Todd's going to end up directing someday. So it was so natural for him. It felt like there was no hesitation. He knew exactly what to do because he's a filmmaker.
Well, why do you say that though, Ricardo? What is it about the qualities that Todd had that makes you say, okay, he's going to be a great director? Because there certainly is a different set of skills.
Todd's superpower is his ability to listen to you. He listens, and he knows how to respond with empathy and love and a sense of belonging. And I don't think that there's any other creature on the planet who requires that more than an actor. And Todd's, and honestly, everybody, heads of departments and crew and everyone. So Todd slipped into that leadership role really easily because it comes from this place of joy and love and passion. And he's able to communicate it because he's able to listen and because he's listening and paying attention. And so when he's at that monitor and he's watching the screen and he's watching a performance, he's dialed in. He's a consummate filmmaker who just happened to choose cinematography as his expression of it. But he was always fit to do this without a doubt.
Man, that's
so
really.
Now well, go ahead, Todd.
No, that's just really, that's really beautiful for you to say. And I feel like I was only able to be free like that because of people like you, because I just truly trusted you and we had done the work together, man. We had done the trust work together and the prep work. And so on set, I would just see you killing it. And as cinematographers, you see everything. You look around, you're used to you see what's happening on set. So I would see what was happening and I was like, oh, they've got it. They've got it. And I can actually just go over here and read the sides and look at these scenes again and actually just be a director, because I was watching it happen the way, not only that I would do it, but just the way that it needed to happen, just when you have each other's backs, you can do it. I mean, it's what I want from a director, right? When I'm a DP is you want that trust where someone's go, do the thing,
So Ricardo, this is your single episode of season 2. You're working under another cinematographer, now turned director. How do you kind of up the ante on your role? Because there's got to be something inside of you that's you're always going to do great work. But when you're working under a fellow cinematographer, there's a different level of understanding. And I'd love to just get your perspective on being a cinematographer for a cinematographer on episode 3.
I've had the good fortune of getting to work with several directors whose roots were in cinematography. A horror movie I did a few years ago, the director's, his day job for many, many years was as a cinematographer. And on another TV show I worked on, the director was a camera operator. And so I always try to take, no matter what director I'm working with, I always try to take a little bit of myself away and just listen. Let me be malleable to the process of the person I'm working with. So if they're really proficient in talking about the tools of our craft, great. If they're not, then whatever gets the best out of them. So there was no, it was just really easy. It was actually quite simple to have that shorthand with Todd. One, because we're friends, and two, because he's, created this show and this beautiful sandbox for us all to play in. So we just went straight to it. We just started talking about the script and the pathos in the script and what these characters were going through. In our particular case, we have this opportunity with Bird's origin story to communicate what Todd has built into the show, which is this sort of nostalgic, this collage of memory. And so what was the opposite? What was sort of the other side of the coin to the Lakers' pizzazz and flash? And if the show in season 1, which we all love, is based in that 80s Ektachrome sort of commercial style photography, then we just talked about, well, what's Bird's? How do we find that DNA and translate it to Bird? And then we came up with our own sort of visual language for that world by testing and by just like having bad ideas and some good ideas that ended up making the show. And that's it. You talk the same way you would any director. You just sort of change the language based on their proficiency. And that was it. We just had fun making sure that whatever we did was grounded in the DNA of the show, but then also the roots of the character. It has to be, or else, we can do these big swings, but if they're not rooted in something, they don't mean anything. And that's why the show works, is because it's not just big and flashy visually, it's because it's grounded in something always.
I love that. John, let's talk about the type of formats that we used in season 2 of Winning Time, because we mentioned earlier that it's mixed format. There's a lot going on. Can you talk us through the different formats that you used and maybe a little bit about how you created some sort of cohesion with them, despite them looking so different?
Yeah, it's such a great tool in the toolbox to have all these textures and all these different ways in which to create images that then inspire, that then make you feel something, And so we had obviously 35 millimeter film was our main 2 cameras. Then we'd have a 16 millimeter that we would like change the gate on. Todd came up with this idea of like changing the gate to go to 12 mil instead of 16. So we're like cropping in on that. And then we've got Super 8, which I know we did sync sound with it. I'm sure they did a little bit of that last year. I know this year we really kind of were really playing into doing like entire takes on sync sound on Super 8, which is a whole nother level of kind of memory, or just creates a different emotion. Like you're almost not supposed to be watching it because you're like, this is weird. I'm used to seeing these like 8 millimeter images silent with music or like audio put in after the fact, but to actually hear dialogue and these performances on this Super 8 on this tiny little format, just super special. And then obviously we had the Ikegami camera, which was from last season as well. And then as the season progresses, Todd moved us all into like a VHS. So it's like we have this other format to then play with. And so, yeah, I mean, we throw these formats around, but there's always intention behind it. There's always a reason, there's it has to be grounded in what we're trying to say, because it's not just an afterthought. It's not just like, oh, let's get some video stuff or some 8 millimeter stuff. It's not just let's grab stuff for the edit. Let's really think about and really Justin, our C operator and our second unit kind of man of many formats, he really kind of leads the charge in terms of just for myself, like coming into this thing and kind of reading these, these look Bibles and these like almost thesis papers on like what these formats mean. Whether it's supposed to be historical, whether it's supposed to be just straight emotion. And when it goes into the editorial and you kind of see it on the other side, like, oh wow, that really works in these instances or these things here or there, or whether we're choosing black and white or color. And that's a very intuitive thing at times. Granted, we have our notes, we have our shot list, and we kind of know the plan, but we're also, I think that's the beauty of us all kind of being filmmakers first, is that we're not afraid to shift and pivot and be intuitive with these formats at our disposal if it feels right. I remember at times going to the director, Tanya, and being like, oh, what if we do it like this? And then we would just do it like that. It would just totally pivot, based on what was happening, based on what we're seeing out of these, actors and the performances. So it's really, don't know. I feel it's one of those things that you kind of get the hang of it right when you've done 30 days of it, and you're really kind of in the zone of like, okay. And then it just forces you to even push it further, like there's a little bit of adjustment period, not going to lie, between like, where do you put the 16, the 12, the Super 8, the video, all at one time, trying to capture this stuff, and also like move at such a fast pace and be efficient with these formats too. So I have to give it up to Dave Etzel and the entire camera team that just, I don't know how they
kill it
all the formats, but they did.
It's unbelievable.
And it wouldn't skip a beat. You'd be like, okay, give me the 16 handheld, go. And you would just all of a sudden you'd be shooting that, So, yeah, it's just
it's so
really
true. You would like,
yeah.
Yeah,
we actually have a question on Instagram that's related to this topic from Michael Hennigan. Wanted to know, how do you decide when it's appropriate to cut to the 8 and the 16 cameras of the show? And I think that question applies to all the different formats. Kind of open to the room. Who wants to tackle it? I'd like to know when how is the decision made that this is the right camera for this scene?
The way,
who wants to take it?
It happens at a couple different stages, right? Like, I feel like we and the director in the shot listing stage have an idea of how the formats are going to be used for a scene, right? I'm sure you guys experience this where you're like, okay, cool. Like, we know that the main shot's going to be a steady cam 35 shot, but then we're going to get this like, oh, that one beat that's really important for that character, we're going to do on 16 millimeter black and white for that one shot. And you write that down in the shot list, right? And then you're like, okay, and then this insert of a document that shows the guy they're going to draft, that's 8 millimeter. Like, that's a really basic breakdown, right? And then when you shoot it, like you were saying, John, sometimes you're like, nope, that totally doesn't work. You're like, great, that's not in black and white anymore. We're changing it. It's VHS. Get in there, And then, so I feel like we play jazz on set, and then I always thought of it like we give all of these, like almost like jazz tracks, like different multi-recorded tracks, or different paintbrushes to the editors. And then they start playing with it. And I feel like I always found like certain scenes, like the editors would find stuff that we either, not that we didn't intend it to be used, but I always thought we were like collecting a bunch of magical moments. And then it was up to them to choose which ones were right, and like to continue playing jazz again. I don't know. But then sometimes we would just straight up deliver them like it was quite obvious. Like, this scene only there's only one choice here, which is that like, it's like you were saying, it's sound sync 8 millimeter, and you can either use it or not, But yeah, I don't know. That's another kind of form of letting go. I felt like we had to go through as DPs of just like, here's a bunch of stuff, and this can be edited very differently. But no matter what, we kind of back all of it, like.
Well, but I think it's always grounded though in, I mean, just watching the first season and then seeing, what we did together, Todd, and what John has done, and what Darren did in his episode. But like, I feel like there's always this connective tissue of, we're looking at something that the characters from their perspective could kind of only see, or if someone else in the room could kind of only see. It's not always necessarily their POV, but it's something that someone in the room would be looking at or pointing at. And so it has a point of view, it has a perspective, and it's part of that memory that like, so, and then Justin, as John pointed out, Justin Cameron, who is the C camera operator, comes in and he brings, again, talking about letting go. Sometimes Justin comes in with just like the best ideas because he just knows that format so well about, okay, well, this moment, I would love to, Rick, do you mind if I go and just grab this quick moment of when Larry grabbed that thing? I just want to be able to see that, and we get a moment on that. You go, oh yeah, that wasn't on the shot list. Just go get it. And then we'll be working on something, and Todd goes, what's Justin doing? He goes, oh, he's doing that thing. Oh my God, of course, absolutely. And tell him to do this too. And then it's just a back and forth, and you let go, but it's always rooted in this sort of perspective of somebody in the room.
I'd like to talk about the way that you approach lighting and shooting the basketball scenes. We talked a little bit about this, Todd, last year. Certainly we can bring it up again with the larger group here. I think what I'll just kind of put it in your hands. There's certain things that I'm most interested in, but I'll bring them up as we're discussing. But John, let's start with you. What is your approach to lighting and shooting the basketball scenes in Winning Time?
Well, overall, like the idea of like recreating, right? Or the idea of capturing these basketball scenes within these arenas that happened so long ago. I mean, that's something that Todd and I really bonded with in some of our initial conversations. Like, how do you kind of create this world that feels like we're never on a movie set or never on a TV show. We have just put the camera there in that moment in time and captured it. And there's multiple shadows. There's, it's shiny. There's reflections that kind of maybe you would maybe try to like manicure or curate in other things. But this idea of like, what does that feel like? And so really just kind of creating that basketball arena from these practical lights, really. It kind of started with that. I mean, that was some of our early conversations about like, just how do you go about even creating emotion on something that is historical and happened, and you have all this like beautiful archival footage of too.
And also lit very flat. I mean, let's be honest, like a basketball game is not something you look at and say, wow, that's the most beautiful lighting I've ever seen. It's unforgiving. Everything's lit, and you really have to like, you don't have a lot of wiggle room to make it kind of dramatic because it's supposed to be realistic. So what were some of the thoughts and what are some of the things and tools that you've employed to like give it such a cool, rich texture, but also have it feel realistic? Todd, you can take this one.
I think the idea was that you set up lighting in this arena stage that mimics real stadium lighting, and then from there you can take that stuff and make it dramatic. You can hyperize it in a way. Like, so what you've got up there is all these Cineo R15 lights, right? Which are these like hard light LEDs, ellipsoidal LEDs that basically when you put enough of them up there, you get all these like crazy cross shadows on people and everything's hyper top lit, right? But in a hard way, like awful metal halides would do in the 80s. But then you've also got a bunch of movers around the perimeter, and all those mover lights we could adjust shot by shot live. So, I mean, I feel like for me, like if we're in the huddle, for example, you'd say, okay, well, the huddle has the base lighting, that's the arena, right? But then you'd say, okay, cool, for this angle, let's take those 3 movers that are in the back and just blast them at 100% and backlight the living hell out of this scenario. And then we would tape silver reflectors on the floor underneath the players so that it felt like, again, it's still like motivated, like stadium lighting that then bounces off the floor, but then it reaches a level of like hyper emotion because it's blown out and too bright up here, and then it's bouncing back way hard and electric under here, and then the players are covered in sweat. So it's like the whole thing becomes, I always felt it was like we were like taking realistic lighting that's ugly and like plugging car batteries into it and like hypercharging what was already there. It was like the feeling I had. I don't know, it was really fun for me because I feel like as DPs, especially like in our generation, like we're always going darker. And like, that's how you get to be bold, is like how little can you see? And I feel like on Winning Time, I learned that like the brighter it is, there's a violence in that. Like there's an emotion in like fill light for me became so punk rock on this show. Like hard, shiny fill light, like lighting up people's skin and the moisture on their skin. And I don't know, I'm rambling, but like there's a shot in the original Blade Runner where he's in the ship, Deckard's in the ship in the car, and he's flying in the beginning and he's like listening to the thing and he's heading to the police station, and a top light comes through the top of his spinner. And it's just like the hardest arc light ever shot by humanity. And it just blows out the top of Harrison Ford's face. And I remember like seeing that and just being like, now that's cool. Like that's punk rock. Like it's like blowing out, So I feel like so much of Winning Time, especially season 2, was about like pushing how far those highlights could just go, So I don't know. I think there's a lot of room.
Well, to your point too, I think it's the tools that he uses. The biggest one is film. Film allows you to put that kind of light on skin tone and just eat it up, and it just rolls off into those highlights so wonderfully. And then in the midtones, it just soaks it up in a way that just looks different. And the curve we use, the S curve we use on top of that to give it that ectochrome look, does such beautiful things in mid-tone skins as well, especially darker skin tones. So I think that first tool you're talking about to shoot something with this much light in those stadiums and give it that Winning Time look, it starts with the film, period. That it was shot on film to begin with is the first bit of that secret sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious if you're actually blowing it out for real on set, or are you just pushing it in post? John, in your experience, are you letting it completely blow out?
Yeah, there's a uncomfortableness that you have to get comfortable with. I think you have to be humbled by the meter and then you're like kind of backed up by the dailies, where you're like, okay, we can push this, or oh wow, I should have pushed this more. That's the thing. And so I think, as you kind of, or as I remember, like, even after the first week, my first full week on the show, you start to kind of see the daily, you see the emotion on set, you see what's going to happen. You just kind of, it's this thing that clicks, and you're just like, okay, light meter kind of goes away, and you start to see how it all works. And then, so yeah, I found the more I pushed it in terms of backlight, top light, even just front light, the more I was kind of rewarded. But it was a scary place, those first couple of days, just being like, I know this is what we're doing. I know this is what I love the result of. To physically do it and put a hard source without any diffusion in front of these amazing actors and just blast them in the face, But yeah, that celluloid, that it just soaks it up. It's a refreshing reminder of kind of the power of film. It really is. And so, yeah, it was just,
I love that term, humbled by the meter. That should be your autobiography. That's like the perfect title for a cinematographer's book.
That's
and
great.
Life story. That is awesome. Yeah, because season 2, it's like season 1. I mean, something we talked about, Todd, in the last episode is just how did you even get buy-on for the look? Because it's so extreme for season 1. But now you're in season 2. Like, everyone's already bought into it. Now it's time to like take it to the next level. And I'm so glad that you mentioned about pushing the highlights, because as I'm watching this show, I'm like, this is different. Like, I was kind of skimming through season 1 episodes too, and I'm like, it feels different. The season feels different. It's just as frantic, it's just as wild, but something is different. I couldn't put my finger on it until you just mentioned now that you push the highlights so much. And there is something so aggressive, again, we keep saying that word, about having that really harsh light. And it's such a great compliment to the show. It's just awesome. I really, really like it. Not even a question, just a fanboy statement. Let's talk about, I want to talk about the way that you approached filming the basketball scenes. We talked about the lighting. I want to talk about the camera choices, the movement in the scene. How many cameras you're covering this, because like we talked about, Todd, in the last time you were on, you're balancing between the actors and a whole bunch of stunt people that are where the real basketball talent is, because a lot of these actors can't play. And you're sort of, you really have a dance that you're doing between bouncing around all of these different characters. Who can we start with? I guess we'll start with you, Todd, and kind of take it from there. But the way that you are approaching the camera decisions, the camera movement to really make those game and even practice scenes come across well.
I mean, I think it's all prep work. And I know that all of us did more prep work on those basketball scenes than any prep I've ever done for a sequence in anything I've shot, period. And it came down to like breaking down the script with the director and really talking about what is the POV and what is the story we're telling inside these basketball plays. I mean, so we'd have meetings where we were talking with the basketball coordinator and our showrunner and our writers, and we would talk about like what is actually happening in basketball physically in these plays. And then on top of that, what is the story we're telling in that play? So it's like, because once you know what the story is, then you know where the camera goes. I think it was, was it Deacons? I feel like it was someone else who said, they asked him, this is Rick, they asked this famous DP, like, how do you know where to put the camera? And he said, that's easy. I just point it at the story. And I think that's so perfect, because it's true, actually, when you simplify it down, it actually becomes quite obvious where the camera needs to go. So once you know that like the sequence is not, it's actually about Magic experiencing Bird make a mockery of him during this play, then you know exactly what story you're telling, and you know that, okay, great. So then we're going to shoot handheld through Bird to Magic, so it's tight eye line there. And then we're going to watch Bird from Magic's position, but then we're going to steal that POV and get in there and physically be there for the dunk. So then you start talking about how to do that. So from there, it became then what tools do the thing. And we had big rehearsal days where we'd bring in our operators and our rollerblade operator, John Lake, and we would talk through every single shot of the basketball sequences, like everything from the fancy basketball stuff to like the simple, where's the coach going to stand during this part? And we would map out physically what everything happens. We would iPhone video, rehearse all the different basketball plays, and then we would talk about what piece of gear is going to be used for that exact shot. And then we would talk about the order that we should be shooting these things so that 5 to 7 camera teams can work efficiently on the day so that we don't just get like topple over each other. So we would figure out, okay, like we can do shot 1, 2, 5, and 7 at the same time. We can do it on 2 Ikegami TV shots, and we can do it from 1 35 millimeter shot in the crowd and 1 dolly shot. And then after that, we can move to, oh, well, we have this Steadicam that's already ready to go with the high speed camera. So let's do that next while we're switching out these things. You know, it's like it took collaboration, communication between every single department, you know, hair, makeup, wardrobe, extras, stunts, so that we could move on these very expensive, very stacked days. I mean, we only had, what, 9 to 11 basketball days this season, and we should have had 20. You know, it's like so you have to do so many things in the day, and there's so many extras, and there's so many camera teams, and there's so much coordination, the prep work that went into it. I mean, I feel like by the end, our days on those days were actually pretty smooth. They were like, we were shooting a shot within 30 minutes of call time with, you know, hundreds of extras and 2 basketball teams and like everyone in period costumes. You're just like, let's, you know, we go. The cameras are ready. So I don't know. It took planning.
Rick, had you shot anything like these basketball scenes before?
My episode in particular doesn't involve Showtime basketball. My episode involves sort of the gunslinger basketball that Todd and I kind of talked about. Like, so it was a lot of Larry Bird in his recruitment period. So I didn't shoot any Showtime Lakers basketball. We shot a much more grounded version of that with Larry as he's playing amongst his friends in West Baden and of course at Indiana State. So my experience of the basketball scenes that were shot was very, very different. We approached it differently than that stuff. But I have basketball experience from Stranger Things. So yeah, I've shot a basketball, like, you know, in that first episode, there's a major basketball sequence and I shot that. So I felt very confident and ready to come in and tackle, you know, this basketball scene. And it also takes place in the 80s. I'm like, I'm ready. And then like, oh no, we're gonna be doing much more grounded work. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, cool. I'm not sad about that at all.
Well, how did you approach it? Well, first of all, I love that. It's like, we need someone that can shoot a basketball scene and understands the aesthetics of the 80s. Check. I've got it. I'm your guy. So you mentioned that you approached it differently in that origin story episode.
Yeah.
Episode 3. How was it different? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, the whole sort of philosophy on Larry Bird's backstory, you know, was how do we, again, like I said earlier, we wanted the flip side of the coin. So it started with a different LUT. We had, you know, it was all that Larry Bird passed was 16 millimeter anamorphic. It had a Kodachrome LUT. We thought, well, what's the other side of the coin to the Showtime Flash? It's the sort of consumer Kodachrome of the 70s. And so that's where the look of that period takes place. And so all of our other visual decisions, not just the basketball, was like, okay, it needs to feel sort of like a spaghetti Western meets this Americana tall tale that is the persona of Larry. And that translated to the basketball. It was like, let's get in there. He shows up to this gym in boots. So let's just get in there, handheld. Let's shoot it more grounded and a little more rough shot. It's sort of his style at that time. So it came from a much more sort of grounded approach. We definitely have him enter the scene sort of grandiose. It's more this gunslinger. We're low. We dolly in with him. We approach it to start that way. But then once it gets going, it's just this rapid fire, you know, gunslinging, scope, handheld. It's all these sort of like, you know, Larry's an enigma, right? So like the look had all these like bits and pieces that made the whole. And so it was very different than the very, very controlled and very coordinated work that they do on the Lakers basketball, which, you know, that was the point. What is the opposite? Larry is sort of seen as this other side of the coin. And that was our approach, not just for the basketball, but for the whole episode.
And John, similar question for you. How did you approach your basketball scenes in your episodes?
Well, I feel like so much of my episodes happened in the office. There's so many sequences and scenes between these, you know, as the politics of like the behind the scenes. And so I always looked at the basketball as this way to really kind of build and show the scale of it, you know, like, so if 80% of our episode is kind of rooted in these kind of the politics and the back and forth, of these characters, kind of jockeying for positions and jockeying for being heard and their voice being heard. Then the basketball is a way to explode it and to show scale. And so I think that was like kind of where that was, I guess, where my head was at a lot of the time. It was like, okay, this is an opportunity to remind everyone of the stakes, to make those scenes in the office even mean more if we can show the scale and the stakes of these games. And so I had the opportunity. We had one of our, I think in episode 4, we had some basketball stuff that was in Salt Lake as well as the Forum, our Lakers home arena. So that was kind of amazing to be able to kind of like play with the 2 different looks and feel of the arenas. And so, yeah, I think it just goes down to prep, and then within the prep to trying to find more efficiencies within the day to be able to kind of just expand it and get more scope and kind of get those extra shots that they end up using in the editorial. We have so much to get on the day. I feel like that was the common denominator, is like, how can you make this more efficient and put the camera where we haven't seen it before? Because like, Todd, you guys did such a great job on the first season. And so again, with this idea of like sharing dailies back and forth and looking at each other's work and pushing the bar, I was just like, how can we push the scope in a way that we haven't seen before? Or just kind of keep pushing to what I would want to see as an audience. Because I was such a big fan of the show. I'm just like, what else can we show? And that's the beauty of the Lakers and Showtime, is that it's flashy, it's brash. So it gives you the creative license to just go big. And a lot of the times it worked. And so we would do, put these wide lenses on up close, or just show scale in a different way, because at the heart of it is about these characters, and these like real life journeys that these characters are going through, but it's told within the scale of this huge, sports arena, sports complex, sports history even. So it's just the balance of like making sure that those things feel earned and deserve, these big explosive moments where we do see scale, that like we're able to then go into like a closet and have 2 of the, our 2 actors kind of just go at it for like 5 minutes. And it feels that much more earned because you've just shown this massive scale, and you get the idea that the world's on their shoulders. Because at that moment in time, I feel like the world is on their shoulders, between the coaches and the players, and the stakes are that high. So just trying to do justice to that and just push it. When in doubt, just put that wider lens on, and if it's not an immediate no, you just go for it.
I love that. I want to talk for a minute about the way that you guys approached Bus's character this season, because he's going through quite a transition in this season. Season 1 is all about getting control, getting success. Season 2 is all about keeping it. And I think the way that you approached filming and lighting him changed quite a bit in season 2. And I'd love to just get a little bit, and this may, every character is going through something as well, but I find it the most interesting with him because he is now completely on the opposite side of the same coin, where he's now trying to hold on to it. How are you going to maintain the success you got in that, championship winning season? Todd, talk to me about the way that you approached Bus and his scenes, and, maybe even the way that you lit and shot him in particular.
I think I thought of it like in season 1, Bus is in full control of the camera, and wherever he goes, the camera, he's the star, these steady cam shots where he's talking to camera and he's lit and he's glamorous, and it's like he's in control of the narrative. And in season 2, we got to flip that around and start like putting the pressure on him. So it was less like shots that are made for him that he gets to control and talk to us, and more shots like pushing down on him, like zooming in on him slow and like using hard backlights and like creating silhouettes. There's a couple like really good silhouettes this year of him. I feel like smoking, stressing about all the things that are coming down on him in like just full backlight. And it's again, like, how can you be violent towards a character, like out of love as a filmmaker, but like, and I think with Bus, it was about like backlighting him in this very aggressive way when we needed to backlight that smoke and like that things that he's going through, and also breaking the skin. I mean, it comes down to like that Winning Time thing of like using hard light to make people's skin, kind of those highlights really pop in a harsh way. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was about like humanizing him and keeping up with the kind of psychological like chaos that he's going through. There's a lot of shots in season 2 where instead of like leading him while he's talking to us in control, we're following him and spinning around him while he's trying to gain control, but it's all kind of falling apart. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things.
It's interesting you talk about control, because I think the scene where it's the most reflective of trying desperately to get control for Bus and also everybody involved is that press conference scene that I think was, I don't know if that was 2 episodes ago or the last episode. I don't know which one of you shot it, but it was when they had to make the announcement that that was your episode, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had to make the announcement that they were once again transitioning coaches mid-season. I'd love to hear your approach to filming that scene, because it couldn't be more of a loss of control and desperately trying to get some of it back for everybody involved. And it was such a great scene. Can you talk to me about the way that you shot that?
Yeah, I mean that press conference where they're kind of announcing the changing of the guard, that was something on paper where you just I don't know, you sink your teeth into something like that, because you're like, this is it's a historical moment, it actually happened, and then B, we're able to like kind of represent it in a way. And so for us it was always, there's like for me there was always 3 different things going on. There's like at the same time there's like, I think there's like 3 stories happening concurrently. You've got Bus and the press, you've got Bus to each other, and then you've got Adrian to West. You've got all these different scenes going on. And so we kind of broke it down into these different kind of, I guess, interplay between the characters. And so we knew, we knew we were going to capture it from the reporter's perspective. And then we were going to have some drama with that. And we were going to use our Ikegami camera to capture that. And then we also were going to come into the sides and kind of make sure that we got this interplay between all the different characters. So it was just one of those special scenes where you capture a bunch of things, and we shot so much on 16 and so much on 8 and Ikegami, and then it just kind of comes together in the edit. And I felt like at one point in time we were doing so many different versions and so many different kind of focal lengths with John C. Reilly. At one point, you really got the sense of like, these are no longer performances, and they're like inhabiting these larger than life characters of the time. And that was when it got really special, I think. And that was, I think, what was captured is that, like, because the repetition of us doing the same press conference and you've got the reporters screaming at them constantly every single take, it's like at some point you lose the fact that these are actors and these are just incarnations of these larger than life characters, that then we're just trying to put the camera in the most interesting place to kind of to get those nuances. And I think that's like the thing that makes that press conference interesting, is like the nuances. It's those pauses, it's those off angles, those low angles, they really just kind of make it special. Like, I feel like there's like so many stories within that press conference that could be told. So I was really happy with how that came out, because
John, you killed it. You killed it. That scene is so good.
Yeah, it's really special.
For me, that's one of those things that was like, oh, thank you guys. That was like, that was one of the initial shot. Like, I think that was one of the first looks from the first season that came out, was that image of the press conference. And I just remember, like, when we first talked about, working together, it was like, I hope I get a press conference. I hope there's a press conference scene, because I'm just such a fan of, kind of like just a fan of that nostalgia and what that means. And because, again, that's this idea of like life heightened, right? That's just a heightened state where everyone's on edge and they're not quite sure what's going to happen or what's going to be told. And the stakes are, you've got this room full of people, just trying to get information out of you. So yeah, it's just it's like, how do you create drama and really kind of, I don't know, achieve that cinematic scale, even though it's a person at a podium and people in chairs. How do you? So I was looking at a ton of different references of different press conferences, either the historical ones that actually happened or just from film references as well. And like, how can we just do justice to it? I think that was the thing. It was like, how do I just like make sure that this scene kind of lives up to like how it should, without individualizing it. It should just be it should live up there, I don't know.
What was one of the references, John?
Not for All the President's Men was like a pretty big reference for me, like throughout, because of all of our offices and the mundane stuff. It's like these mundane conversations seemingly, but the stakes are so high. And I think the use of fluorescence and the use of flares. So I was kind of going back to films of like the 60s and 70s and trying to be like, how did they get gritty, and what did they do, and what did they get away with on celluloid? Because I feel like and that's the thing too, is that like, I think a modern aesthetic is like softer, shape, negative fill, and ours was very much, no, let's just blast lights right at these people, at these actors, and it's just great.
I love it. All right, last question for everybody. We'll go around the room. We'll start with you, Rick. Favorite scene of your episode? What do you think?
Oh, wow. I personally, I'd say between Larry and Red, inside Larry's home in French Lick in the past. It's just those two. The writing, Michael Chiklis, who plays Red Auerbach, is so good in that. And those are my favorite scenes. The production design by Rich Doyen is so good, and the costumes by Emma are incredible. And you just get to point your camera. We shot that scene like it was pitch black outside. And so we just got to light it up and burn skin, but also find some shadow. And it let those characters occupy that space and do what they do. That's my favorite stuff. I mean, I was so thrilled to just sit and watch it while it was happening. I don't know what else to say. But I'd say that was probably my favorite scene. I felt very much like I was shooting Winning Time while making that, while shooting that scene. Also, Todd, Conrad Hall.
Thank you, Conrad Hall.
Conrad Hall said that. Yes.
How do I know where to put the camera? Easy. I pointed at the story. Conrad Hall.
Okay. Conrad Hall was.
I pointed at the story.
Oh, okay.
That's Conrad Hall.
There you go. John, same question. What was your favorite scene to shoot and why?
I mean, obviously, I think the press conferences that that one we just kind of talked about, that was such a pivotal scene. But another one that really stood out was the whole sequence of Salt Lake and in episode 4 when really Westhead and Magic kind of go at each other. They go at each other like in front of people, and then that carries into like a locker room and into a closet, and then right when Magic makes the decision to be traded, or he wanted to be traded. And so that whole sequence, Rick, to kind of speak to what you said, like you feel like you're shooting Winning Time. You feel like you're in this heightened state. The performances are there. And so I think, obviously that sequence was shot over days, from the arena days to the different kind of sets we had. And so getting that kind of visual language and the continuity between them. So it feels like we're handheld and we just move from the arena into the hallway, into the locker room, just to kind of get that cohesive. That was like the main goal of that, to make it feel like it was all just one big sequence that you're watching in real time. And so, to see that kind of come together and be the finale of episode 4 was pretty rewarding.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, can I amend mine too? And Todd, or you want to talk about it? The opening, it's not even a scene. It's just the opening, like 3 shots of John C. Reilly in our episode where he's in bed in his house. And we go in on him. It's not even a scene. It's just like a few shots of John.
It's a scene.
It's that's just my favorite moment in our episode. You can elaborate, Todd. But sorry, I'd like to just bring that up because
that's totally my favorite.
Everything Winning Time.
It's everything. I know. I agree. I think that's that sequence that opens our episode where Magic and Bus are watching themselves get beat by the Celtics on TV, and it's in Bus's bedroom, and we're pushing in low on him, and he's wearing his robe, and the robe's open. And no, I felt it. That's my favorite too, because I think it's everything that Winning Time wants to be, which is like, it's just joy. It's like, if you love these characters, if you love this time period, if you love the movies that we loved that made this show, like, this is for you. It's just like it's a feast. It's so funny. Yeah, I feel like in that moment, I was like, I can't believe we're getting away with this. Like, I can't believe all the decisions led us to be able to do this. And like, including the costume, like, you know what I mean? For like Emma Potter and for John C. Reilly to like decide together that that's going to be the look in the bedroom. And then for you to light it the way you did, like just like pure Boogie Nights deliciousness. I mean, and then, that low push in. Yeah, it's just joy. It's my favorite.
And it's everything that you said, Todd. It's like, it's aggressive. On this season on China, we push in. It's like we mix Steadicam and a zoom. And then we're pushing in low up at him. It's dolly and a zoom. Everything is moving at him and flying around him, and it's aggressive. And then like, it's hard light. That scene is lit with 2 units, one to backlight him and one hard light smashing into his face. And the rest is Rich Doyen doing most gorgeous production design. And it's just, that's Winning Time.
Yeah. I mean, there's something I was thinking too, like, John, like your sequence you were talking about is so incredible in your episode where the things are falling apart between Magic and Westhead. And I remember because I just watched your episode when it came out, 2 days ago on Sunday. And when they come out of the little room the closet where they argued with each other, and then Magic comes out and it's like a steady cam shot that follows him down the hallway. Sound design put in this like sound underneath in the bass for that moment where he comes out. And I remember thinking like, whoa, like you guys, the storytelling here is so sharp from the script that like all the other artists that came after you picked up on those decisions and ran with it even further. And like that sound design is like a choice. Like everyone understands what the script was doing. The actors understood, you guys with the camera, the editors, and then eventually sound. And like that moment to me just like is so strong for an audience. It's just really impressive. I'm really proud of you guys. It's amazing.
Well, you got to select your favorite scene now. Now it's all you. It could be a favorite scene to direct or a favorite scene to shoot.
My favorite scene is the opening of the whole season where they're getting chased by like the white zombies through the arena onto the bus. There's a moment where everyone is like rushing the bus and like throwing food onto the bus, and we're inside the bus. And there's just like, it's a sequence where like we're shooting a lot of it on VHS. And I remember seeing, it was me or Justin was in the back of the bus with like a little VHS camera, and everyone's outside throwing food on the windows and everyone's screaming inside. And Pat Riley's like yelling, like, let's get the F out of here. And like a hot dog slams the window near Magic's head. And it was a decision we made on the day. And then when we came back to shoot the next sequence where you're actually like on the bus with them for doing dialogue, we had boxed ourselves in to doing the entire conversation with like a chili dog stuck to the window next to Magic's head. And I just remember these like long conversations with our art department about like placing this hot dog and like, okay, well, the dog itself would have bounced off, but the bun would stay stuck on the window. And I just remember like, that's filmmaking for me, you know, like that's like the joy of like a show that is, gives itself permission to be so serious and be so silly at the same time. You know, it's like, it's a very important scene of Magic and Riley. And then there's this huge splattered hot dog bun just circling, you know, on the window by his face. So that's my favorite contribution to this season.
Well, I am such a huge fan of this whole series. You guys you just nailed it with season 2. And as much as I hate to say it, because I am from Boston and I do remember those days, it is kind of Boston. You guys kind of nailed it the way Boston is. It's like, I don't want it to be true, but I do at the same time because I watch it and I'm like, hell yeah, that's exactly what it's all about. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess we could be kind of dicks sometimes too, but anybody can. So good for you representing Boston the way that you did. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back. This was a lot of fun. I don't think we've ever had this many people on the show before, but it was great. You made it a joy, and the show is just so goddamn good, guys. And it looks so good. Thanks to you guys. So thanks for being on Go Creative Show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. I want to thank Todd Banhazl, John Matysiak, and Ricardo Diaz for joining us here on Go Creative Show and talking to us all about their experiences on Winning Time Season 2. I also want to thank Connor Crosby for producing this podcast. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. Dave Siegel for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find him at siegelsound.com. And of course, all things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. Subscribe to us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where you can not only hear the show, but see the show. If you're interested in what I'm doing with my production company, BC Media Productions, and my band, 3 Second Chances, there's a lot happening in the world of Ben Consoli, and all of it is there on Instagram at Ben Consoli. I want to thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time on the next Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.